Few people know this, but there is a book attributed to Adam himself. Yes, the first man would have left recorded words, a sacred ancestral text written even before Genesis took shape. But something happened. It was silenced, hidden, erased from the books that we now call the Bible, and whoever had access to this content preferred that the world never see it again. Today, you will understand why this book was banned and what it said before it was torn from sacred history. Its existence came to light thanks to obscure manuscripts discovered in ancient caves and forgotten libraries, even after centuries of attempts to completely destroy it. If you feel that something is missing in the story you were told, perhaps this is the part that was hidden from you. Stay until the end, and if this touches your heart, like it, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because some truths can no longer remain silent. Why does a book directly related to Adam not appear in Genesis? Why did Moses, when writing the first 5 books, not mention its existence? Or did he mention it and we just didn't notice? There are rabbis, monks, and ancient scholars who speak of an earlier book, an original writing that would have been passed down through the generations, a book that contained instructions, visions, and dialogues between Adam and God himself. But if all this is true, who erased it, and with what intention? This text is called in some sources the Book of Adam, Book of the Words of Adam, or even Life of Adam and Eve. It appears in ancient documents, such as the Apocalypse of Moses, and also in Ethiopian and Armenian literature. In some apocryphal manuscripts, it is said that Adam would have recorded everything he saw and heard in Eden from the creation until the moment he was expelled from paradise. A testimony that would have been passed on to his children and preserved for generations, until it mysteriously disappeared. But what was it about this book that was so disturbing? What was so dangerous that it justified its complete erasure? According to the fragments found, it contained revelations about the spiritual state of Eden, detailed descriptions of the angels who guarded paradise, and divine warnings about the future of humanity. Adam had written about a time before sin, and also about a mystery, the presence of other beings on earth before him. This contradicted the dominant narrative, and so it was buried. Many scholars believe that this book was deliberately removed because it contained spiritual truths that challenged the religious structure built centuries later. It not only described Eden, but presented an intimate portrait of creation, the dialogue between God and Adam, and even the feelings of the first man after the fall. It was not a book of myths, it was a direct testimony, and that made it too dangerous to keep among the sacred texts, especially for those who wanted to control the narrative from the beginning. There are passages preserved in works such as the Apocalypse of Moses, which are part of the ancient Jewish tradition. It also appears in Ethiopian and Greek writings, with fragmented versions that surprise with their content. In one of these passages, Adam recounts a visit from angels who comfort him after being expelled from Eden. In another, he speaks of a light that shone in the garden before the creation of the sun. There are also mentions of beings who walked the earth before it was, formed from dust. Who were these beings? Why have their names disappeared? The most surprising thing is that this book was not completely unknown in ancient times. Patriarchs such as Seth and Enosh are said to have preserved its writings. There is evidence that Noah took fragments of this knowledge on the ark, but as generations passed and religious power was centralized in human hands, the book was labeled as dangerous. Anything that did not fit within the doctrines was erased. What remains of it survives only in hidden, buried manuscripts, secretly translated by monks and rabbis who knew they were dealing with something greater than mere words. Among the most shocking passages is the moment when Adam describes how he saw the future of the earth, wars, suffering, and the rise of a people who would reject the Creator. He is said to have wept not only for his own fall, but for what would come after. Some scholars argue that these visions were too prophetic and that they revealed secrets that should only be known in the last days. That is why the Book of Adam remains, to this day, among the most hidden texts in the spiritual history of humanity. One of the most enigmatic passages relates that Adam, after being expelled from Eden, asked God that his memory not be erased. He begged that his words be preserved, even if the world would forget them for a time. According to the fragment, a hand of fire wrote his records on spiritual tablets, which would be hidden until the time of the end. This imagery, symbolic or literal, raises a profound question. This book was not merely forgotten, it was deliberately sealed, awaiting the right moment to be rediscovered. Other parts of the text describe Adam's relationship with the garden in a way that is completely different from the official narrative. Instead of just a physical space, Eden is described as a place with multiple layers, spiritual, angelic, and earthly. It speaks of a door of light through which angels entered, and of a sound that constantly echoed like a divine song. These descriptions position Eden as a connection point between heaven and earth, which reinforces the idea that the book presented a much higher and more dangerous vision by the standards of later religions. There is also a passage in which Adam claims to have heard conversations between God and other beings before its creation. He mentions that the earth was already being observed long before "let there be light," and that angels, or something similar to them, discussed what kind of creature would be placed there. This matches some clues left in books like Enoch and even in Gnostic Apocrypha, which suggest a previous creation, or at least a celestial structure before man. If this is true, the Book of Adam holds one of humanity's best hidden secrets. And perhaps the most delicate point of all, there are records that this book spoke of a spiritual war that took place in the heavens before the creation of humanity. Adam would have received this knowledge directly from the Creator as a warning. He would have seen the fall of a powerful celestial being, not named directly, but identified as the one who opposed the will. This revelation, if confirmed, would place Adam not only as the first man, but as the first guardian of a cosmic truth, a truth that the ancient leaders preferred to bury. Some scholars have suggested that this part of the text may have been the main reason for its removal. The narrative in which Adam is not just a passive character in creation, but someone who receives profound spiritual revelations shortly after the fall, something that directly challenges the idea that man was completely separated from God at that point. On the contrary, the book suggests that God continued to instruct Adam, showing him visions and entrusting him with information about humanity's past and future. This could shake centuries of doctrine based on the total separation of heaven and earth after sin. In some Ethiopian manuscripts, there is an extraordinary scene where Adam describes a fallen angel trying to convince him that he had been wronged. This being, shrouded in darkness, approached the man not with hatred, but with arguments. He said that he too had been a creation of God, but that he had been rejected for disobeying a commandment that he considered unjust. This passage was considered heretical by many ancient religious people, but if it is true, it may indicate that Adam had direct contact with heavenly history before men even knew what sin was. Other passages speak of Adam's tears falling to the ground and giving rise to hidden springs. These symbolic details have been taken by mystics to refer to the emergence of sacred rivers, and perhaps even the 4 rivers of Eden. The connection between human suffering and the physical elements of creation reinforces the idea that Adam was more than just a farmer in paradise. He was a link between the spiritual and the material, someone whose pain had the power to alter the very fabric of the earth. If this was indeed in the book, Perhaps it was removed to prevent man from seeing himself as too close to the divine. There is also an enigmatic sequence in which Adam, now outside the garden, speaks to Eve about a book that will be closed and will only be opened at the end of time. He does not say where this book is or who will find it, but he does mention that when it is read again, the children of the serpent will tremble. This phrase appears almost identically in some Gnostic writings and in ancient versions of the Book of Enoch. It is as if there were an echo of this prophecy scattered throughout rejected texts, all pointing to a truth that has been suppressed but that still survives in the margins of sacred history. This repetition of themes, sealing, hidden book, end times, is no coincidence. Several manuscripts discovered at Qumran in the Dead Sea mention books sealed from the foundation of the world. Some of them speak of a first record, written by the very hand of a being created directly by God, and in some passages, Adam's name appears as the original author. This raises an intriguing hypothesis. The Book of Adam may have been the primary source for other revelations, like the Book of Enoch itself, a parent text removed so that the later pieces would be incomplete and the overall picture fragmented. We cannot ignore the fact that in the first centuries of the Christian era, many of these texts circulated among Christians and Jews without restriction. What changed was the emergence of councils and religious authorities interested in organizing a standardized doctrine. In this process, everything that was difficult to interpret or threatened the new spiritual hierarchy was classified as dangerous or heretical. And the Book of Adam, with its raw, direct vision connected to the invisible, was one of the first to be forced into oblivion. But not everyone forgot it. Monasteries in North Africa, Ethiopian communities, and certain Eastern rabbis continued to copy fragmentary versions of the text for centuries. Many of these monks did not fully understand its contents, but they knew that there was something powerful there, something that needed to be preserved, even if in secret. Respect for the name of Adam, considered by many to be the first prophet, kept these words from being completely lost. It is thanks to the fidelity of these anonymous guardians that we now have access to parts of this book. But what does it really mean for us today? Why does its rediscovery seem to bother us even today? The answer may lie in the essence of what it carries: a call to repentance, a direct reconnection between the Creator and creation without intermediaries. The Book of Adam presents man not as a mere spectator of the divine, but as a conscious participant endowed with spirit, vision, and voice. This idea, in any era, is dangerous for those who wish to keep people away from the truth, and so it remains the book they never wanted you to find. There is a curious detail in the oldest fragments. The book always begins with light. Not with the creation of light, but with the memory of light. Adam describes an indescribable brightness that surrounded his existence before the fall. He claims that this light did not come from the sun, but from God directly, as if the divine presence enveloped all creation. When he was expelled from Eden, he did not mourn the earth or the tree. He mourned the loss of this light, and he prayed that one day it would be returned to humanity. This description connects with passages in the New Testament that speak of a true light that would come into the world. Another symbolic but extremely powerful passage is when Adam says that silence came upon the earth after his fall. The sound of creation ceased, the trees stopped singing, and even the water stood still for a moment. It is as if the earth itself felt the rupture. This narrative suggests that sin was not only spiritual, it broke the rhythm of creation. This kind of interpretation would never be accepted in a rational theological doctrine. It demands spiritual sensitivity, and that is why the book was considered dangerous. It does not just inform, it awakens. An even more disturbing point is when Adam speaks of the son of the earth and the son of heaven. He says that his descendants will be divided between those who love the earth and those who love the Creator. This idea also appears in the Book of Jubilees and in the Gnostic writings: two lineages, two paths, the spiritual lineage that seeks reconciliation and the carnal lineage that rejects the high. If this division dates back to Adam, then the conflict we see in the world today has roots much older than we imagine, a conflict that began even before Cain and Abel. And it is at this point that the text takes on a frightening prophetic tone. Adam writes that in the last days his writings would be revealed not by kings nor by wise men, but by babes. He speaks of ordinary people who would open their eyes and bring to light what had been buried. He says that the proud would reject the book, but the humble would recognize its voice, and that when this happened, the serpent would move again. This last phrase has been interpreted as an eschatological sign. The reopening of the Book of Adam would mark the beginning of something much greater and irreversible. This possible connection between the return of the book and the movement of the serpent has been debated by modern scholars. Some see it as a direct reference to the apocalypse, to the ancient enmity between the woman and the dragon. Others believe that Adam already had a spiritual vision of the end times revealed to him after the fall as a warning and a hope. This completely changes the perception of Adam. He would not only be the beginning of humanity, but also the first to see its end. And perhaps the first to weep for it. In manuscripts preserved in Coptic and Armenian codices, there is a symbol that recurs at the end of passages from the book: two interlocking circles with a central dot. Some interpret this as a symbol of the union between heaven and earth. Others say it represents the portal that closed in Eden and will open again in due time. This symbol also appears in ancient artifacts from Mesopotamia and even in inscriptions from Egypt. This raises a disturbing hypothesis. What if the Book of Adam influenced entire civilizations far beyond the Hebrew tradition? This possible crossover between ancient cultures and the text attributed to Adam reinforces the idea that he was more than just a biblical character. He was a transitional figure between the spiritual and physical worlds. And his book, far from being just a religious narrative, may have been a spiritual key, a code that ancient peoples tried to preserve through symbols, structures, and legends. If true, then it is not just the Bible that has hidden this content. The entire world has been shaped to forget it, but it has not been completely forgotten. In recent times, parts of this book have begun to circulate on the internet, in documents released from old libraries, in translations made by independent scholars. They are fragments, loose pieces, but together they begin to form a clear and disturbing picture. What we see is that this book, even in pieces, still speaks, and its words echo as if they were waiting for this exact moment in history, a time when the masks fall and the truth, however buried it may be, finds its way back. The most striking thing is to realize that all of this was outside the official history. For centuries, religious leaders determined what should and should not be read, what was inspired and what was dangerous. The Book of Adam fell into the second group, not because it was false, but because it said too much. It shows that from the beginning, man has had consciousness, spiritual sensitivity, and direct communication with the Creator, a truth that, if known by all, would destroy dependence on human mediators and give people back something that was taken away: pure access to the origin. Some say that the few fragments that exist are enough to shake centuries of doctrine, and in fact, when we read that Adam saw the end, that he talked with angels, that he understood the structure of the heavens, we realize that this book was not a simple record. It was a denunciation against forgetfulness, against manipulation, against the erasure of humanity's spiritual heritage, and at the same time it was a promise that one day everything would come back to light. This return, according to some scholars, is happening now. We live in a time when forgotten documents are being digitized, ancient libraries are being opened, and ordinary people, not priests, are seeking the truth for themselves. What was once accessible only to a select few is now available to everyone. And perhaps that is why the Book of Adam is resurfacing now, not by chance, but by necessity. The world needs to remember what was taken from it in the beginning. And maybe that's the real reason the book was hidden. It has the power to awaken, to make man remember who he was before the guilt, before the lie, before the separation. Because if Adam, even after the fall, could still hear the voice of God, then maybe we can too. Maybe the story that began with him is still waiting to be completed by us. And the most curious thing is that the more we investigate the details of the Book of Adam, the more we realize that it does not contradict the Bible. It deepens it. It fills in the gaps. It answers questions that were left open. It shows us that there was something before, let there be light, and that this something was loaded with purpose, revelation, and warning. The book does not erase Genesis. It prepares the heart to understand it more deeply, and perhaps that is why it was so feared, because an awakened people does not allow themselves to be easily manipulated. If Adam's words have indeed come down through time, hidden by monks, forgotten in caves and libraries, and are now returning, then we have the chance to be part of something prophetic, because this return is not just historical, it is spiritual. It is as if we are being called to reopen an ancient scroll, silently crying out to be read. And when we do so, a bridge is created between the beginning and the end, between the one who fell and those who today rise. Many will still resist. Many will say it is dangerous, that it is heretical, that it is an invention. But isn't that exactly what they have always done with the truth? Every time a revelation threatened the structures of power, it was called a threat. But those who thirst, seek, and those who seek, find. And if this book has reached this far, it is because there are eyes that are ready to see, and hearts that no longer accept living in the dark. Perhaps you who are watching have been prepared your entire life for this moment, to discover that the first written voice was not that of Moses, but that of Adam, and that the first book of humanity was not Genesis, it was its prelude. A letter left by the first man so that one day the last men would know that the fall was not the end. The Book of Adam is not just an ancient artifact, it is a witness. He was there when it all began. He wept over Eden. He saw the future, and he waits silently for those who have the courage to read it with the eyes of their soul. Because his words are not just historical, they are seeds, and when they fall on fertile soil, they awaken something that not even time can erase. Think for a moment, why were so many truths buried? Why were documents like this hidden, burned, discredited? Who benefits from a humanity disconnected from its spiritual origin? And even more, what happens when this humanity reconnects? This video is not about an ancient book. It is about you, about us, about a call that comes from the beginning, a voice that has broken through the centuries and whispers in your heart, "Come back. Remember, you came from me." And perhaps the Book of Adam is the missing key to unlocking this memory. If this truth burns in your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. And now we have a members area. By becoming a member, you bless this work and help us to continue producing edifying and revealing content like this. Just click on the Become a Member button below, next to the Subscribe button. Be a part of this, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from now?